You'll be glad to know that concludes the formal presenting part of the day. So we now move to the final panel session, panel discussion. And for this panel, I'm delighted to hand over the chairing to Barry Caslin. So Barry is the Teagasc Rural Energy and Rural Development Specialist based at the Longford Town Teagasc office. And Barry has been involved in the renewable side, indeed with Teagasc, for many, many years, and we work very closely with Barry through the Irish Bioenergy Association in our work as well. And I'm delighted that Barry could take the time out today to chair this panel. So Barry will be joined on stage by Daniel Walsh from Estellas, Marty Dervin from IrBEA, and Kinney McCauley from the Designer Group. So I'd ask the three lads as well to join us, and I'll hand over to Barry. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Sean, for the invite to be here this afternoon as well. There's a very big trend with IrBEA events. For any of you who attend a lot of these events, they always leave the very, very best panels to the last. So you're obviously all aware of that. Look at the panel, if you want to come on and head up. Sorry, blocking you there. Yeah, so this session is really about the practical aspects. Two of our panelists here today, Marty and Marty has been involved from IrBEA there in terms of developing a project there, and a biomass project, a live project that's been working for a number of years. So it'll be great to hear the experiences that they had in adopting biomass and their boiler systems and how they integrated biomass into their existing system. It's the same with Estellas there with Daniel. Daniel there, the very first on your left, is an energy engineer in Estellas Pharma. And again, they've put in a biomass boiler a number of years ago. So again, it'll be very, very interesting to hear their story, challenges, because obviously there will be teething challenges in terms of changing over from a fossil fuel over to a renewable source. And we'll be hearing that story as well. And of course, Kenny here is a design engineer. He has a couple of hats. He also supplies biomass as well, but he's not really here in that capacity. He's here more in the capacity to talk about design systems and integrating biomass systems into an existing fossil fuel system. So it's mainly around that area we'll be having the discussion here this afternoon. So thank you for the three of you for being here. Biomass is an area that's had different, I suppose, there's been different ebbs and flows within the whole biomass sector over the last number of years. I really got involved in this area back in 2006. There was a lot of farmers who were getting involved in energy crops, growing energy crops at the time. There was a lot of people who were involved in the forestry sector who were looking at opportunities of supplying biomass as a fuel source. And of course, we had a number of farmers maybe in the poultry sector, the horticultural sector, and in the pig sector who looked at putting in biomass boilers as well. So they saw this as an opportunity of decarbonising, but also a cheaper fuel source, because they were able to buy in the biomass at maybe 3-4 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas the oil equivalent was costing maybe 2 to 3 times that. So they were getting the saving, and this was even pre-support scheme for renewable heat period. So I see biomass, it's more than just a fuel, it's a driver for rural innovation and sustainability as well. There's a need for renewables, and biomass is going to be part of that mix. I always say there's a jigsaw puzzle of different renewables that will be needed into the future in terms of meeting our targets. Biomass is only one part of that. We have wind, we have solar, we'll have biomethane hopefully in the future as well. There'll be a lot of different renewable sources, but they'll all have a role to play in various proportions. It'll add value as well in rural areas. I also wear the rural development hat within Teagasc also, so I see this as an opportunity for innovation, but also for job creation in rural areas as well, where we can see supply chains, maybe biomass trade centres evolving, whereby biomass can be traded from forestry products like depots. It could be straw, it could be other biomass feedstocks that could be used to feed biomass systems throughout the country. So we'll start off, and hopefully you'll come in with your own questions after a while as well. I'm just going to put a few questions to our panellists, and maybe after a while we'll put the questions to the floor. Maybe Noel might go around with a mic for that. So maybe we start with yourself, Daniel. We've had a few chats earlier on today and during the week about this as well. Maybe if you can just tell us about Estellas and your journey and what you're doing in terms of what you're processing and how biomass was integrated into your company.
Yeah, so I suppose just to give you a bit of background on Stellis, it's a pharmaceutical plant down in Kildare in Kerry. There's about 400 employees, so I suppose our main products would be Prograph, which we started producing back in 1992. That moved on then to Advagraph and Mycamine, and one of the new products is Voiloy, which is a cancer treatment drug. So I suppose we have a long history within Killorglin. It's more of a rural site probably than a lot of pharmaceuticals. Originally, I suppose the site used 2 oil boilers. Generally, we'd be looking for about 2,000 kilograms of steam. So I think the wood chip boiler we have now integrated very well into the system. Again, it's a 1.8 megawatt capacity, so we get about 2.5 tons of steam out of it per hour. And again, I suppose there were large enough works. The original boilers were a bit down from the site, so you'd look at about 500 meters of a pipe run. So I suppose when you're recovering condensate and things, it's about 1 kilometer of pipe work there and back. But again, it's, I suppose, our rural kind of location led well into the biomass journey. We obviously don't have any connection to the national gas grid, so going from oil to biomass and wood chip in particular was kind of an obvious step for ourselves.
And what specific temperatures do you operate at?
So we're operating at 10 bar steam at the moment, which is 185 degrees. So I suppose some of the processes on site would be, they entail Wi-Fi, pure steam generation. We also have CIP for clean in place, and again the steam produces all of our low temperature hot water, our domestic hot water load on site. So in total, I think the low temperature hot water is taking about 60% of the steam usage. So the actual process side isn't taking a large amount, to be honest. The Wi-Fi is only about 7%. So we have to, I suppose, maintain at least 120 degrees for Wi-Fi. It's multiple effect distillation, so there are opportunities to move over to more electrically driven methods of producing that Wi-Fi, but at the moment we're probably going to stick with the 10 bar steam. But again, there's opportunities to reduce that. We're looking in projects at the moment, possibly in the next couple of years.
And can you discuss about modifying the existing infrastructure that was in the plant in Killorglin? Because you were obviously on oil prior to this. So discuss maybe how you modify the existing infrastructure to move to biomass.
Yeah, so the 2 original oil boilers, I suppose they're in their own boiler house down, as I was saying, about 400 meters from the site. So they were feeding into the 1 steam header. I suppose the challenge then was to build a new house for the wood chip boiler. That again is probably about 500 meters from the site. But I suppose you're just looking to run steam pipe work over to the main header. We opted to keep the 2 oil boilers as backup then, so it integrated well. The 2 oil boilers now are running about 5% of the year, basically when we exceed the wood chip boiler demand or when it's taken down for maintenance. But I suppose in terms of the overall project cost, it went in back in 2012, so it was obviously cheaper than it is to do it now, but it was about €2 million. So obviously you have your storage and delivery pits. The delivery pit we have is about 25, capable of holding 25 tons of wood chip. The storage pit then is about 80 ton capacity. So we're using typically, I'd say, 3 to 4 truckloads of wood chip, so 20 ton each a week. So we'd have at least a week's capacity within there. Again, I suppose one of the main challenges is just looking at the delivery to site. We do have substantial amount of traffic going around. There'll be about 20, I'd say 20 lorries in and out a day. So the additional kind of 3 to 4 loads of wood chip a week doesn't make a huge difference. But again, I suppose it's looking at kind of integrating that into your site kind of layout. For ourselves, there was space towards the back. So again, it was an easy enough integration. Obviously, there's a lot of routing and pipe work, like I said, so generally they'd be some of the main challenges, I think.
And Daniel, is it just one boiler you have? Is it one single boiler? What size is that single boiler, or do you have it split into 2 different boilers? And how much tonnage per year of biomass do you take in?
So it's just the one 1.8 megawatt wood chip boiler. On average, we're looking at about 4,500 tons of wood chip a year. So like I said, that's about 3 to 4 deliveries a week of 20 tons each. And again, I suppose in kilowatt hours of steam production, it's about 14 million kilowatt hours a year of steam it generates.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. We move over to Marty there. So, Marty, you're in IrBEA, you're in Ballahadreen. You're not far over the road from where I'm living. So, if you can just maybe explain where, you know, your journey in this. Again, you moved from a fossil fuel to a renewable fuel. Maybe talk to us about that journey as well, please.
Yeah, up to, I suppose, just to give you it's a dewatering plant we have in Ballahadreen there, where we bring in milk at 90% moisture and we send it out in bags at 2% moisture, so it's very heat intensive. So I suppose the opportunity, we were on heavy fuel oil, and the days of heavy fuel oil was sort of grinding to a halt, so we were looking at other alternatives. So we just looked at biomass then as being, because in the northwest there's a big supply of biomass, you know, and a lot of our shareholders would have parcels of biomass available, and we were part owners in ECC Cho at the time, so they had the waste material there available to us. So we embarked in the process anyway and put in our biomass boiler in, say, 2012 it started, and by 14 it was commissioned, and of course we had predicted the same figures we're sort of predicting now, €100 a tonne for carbon, and I think the figure was 6 or 8 cent a kilowatt hour for oil, and of course the arse fell out of the oil, and everyone wondered who were the idiots that thought of biomass. But anyway, things changed around and carbon crept up and oil price crept up, so everyone would hug you now and say, geez, that was a great job you done back then. And there was guys that was saying the opposite, then taking the credit for it. The extent of what we have there is we're burning about 23,000 tonnes of biomass a year, which is in the region of 60 million kilowatt hours. Is producing about 45% of our heat requirement, eliminating just on the heat side.
Are you still using a fossil fuel as well?
We're still using fossil fuel to top up the other 50, whatever it is, percent.
Is that oil or gas?
It's gas at the moment, yeah. We went to LNG there because its price was very competitive there back before COVID, and then during COVID it sort of went all over the place. So we installed in 2023, we installed an LPG compound. So we installed 2 new boilers then. Sort of the reason we looked at putting in one big boiler, about 28 tons per hour of steam. But then when the energy efficient design process, as per SEI there, we decided we'd go with 2 smaller boilers, and they actually worked out, when we took in the cost of transport and that, they actually worked out a bit cheaper. So, and we have better turn down, so that on a Sunday when we don't need only a small whisper of steam, one of those boilers can tip away at a couple of tons of steam an hour.
And what size are those boilers?
They're 14 tons each, and we are running there mostly now on the biomass at doing about 14 or 15 ton output an hour, and one of those boilers. At peak we need about 30 tons of steam.
How do you control the quality around that? Like, what moisture do you have to operate at, and do you have any kind of quality control procedures in place that you can make sure the material coming in meets your specification for the boiler?
Yeah, well, each load is sampled by the supply company, and we have a guy doing milk powder analysis and that, so he does moistures and sieve analysis. So, like ideally, we're looking for around 45 to 50% moisture.
Okay, so it doesn't need to be dried down that much. That's fairly fresh material. So
Yeah, we find there that say we have 30% moisture, and we have done various trials on it. We sort of maybe made a mistake back then, but the technology mightn't be as advanced or whatever. When we put in the boiler, it's a steady state boiler, so the control on, say, under air or over air, or that is in a fixed state through dampers. So I would like, for a modification, we would like to change that. And possibly the other downside of the boiler is the turn down. Like it's not an ideal thing to be going from your 15 ton an hour down to 8 ton an hour or 6 ton an hour. You know, it needs steady state usage.
yeah, so the boilers ramping up and ramping down isn't ideal. So they're suited to where you have a continuous demand for that heat.
Continuous demand, yeah.
And you have better efficiencies within your system.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Could you give us an idea of the efficiencies of fuel in versus energy out?
The boiler is running during the summer months at about 70% efficiency, and then because during the winter months we run it, but the efficiency drops way down because we don't run it. It gets cold over the weekend, so we're starting up on a Monday morning, which is not ideal. And we're looking at maybe putting gas into it so that you would keep a certain amount of heat in the boiler during the weekend, and then you could fire it up faster with the gas on a Monday morning, so you would have usage of biomass a lot faster. And then on a Friday evening, or if it's Saturday, depending on the production profile, again, it has to go off, like, and a guy has to sort of mind it until it goes off, because
Could you give us an idea of the labour input that's needed? How many people have to be there in terms of monitoring the boilers, ash removal, all of that? What kind of labour is involved?
The boiler works away on its own, like, and really we have a guy on, as we say, on services on the day shift, and then there's a guy on the whole shift looking after the whole factory at night. So, like, really the same guy would be on services if we didn't have the biomass. It's just that the input, the care it needs when you're switching it up and going down, you know, because there is a possibility when a fire is the biggest danger with a biomass boiler. And I know you have deluge systems and that, but there's still, when we put it in first, we had bag filters in it, which was a total disaster altogether. So we're now on a cyclone and an electrostatic precipitator, which is working away very well.
Okay. Maybe explain those technologies to people, please, about cyclones, electrostatic precipitators, what they do and why they're necessary within a biomass combustion system.
Well, it's part of one of the previous guys was on about there, the EPA requirements there to keep your dust and your actual emissions, you know, and we had to do the modelling of the emissions the same as was described in the previous thing to satisfy the EPA for our license.
Why was the bag not working in the initial?
Well, there was too much live fly ash coming off, and it would just get caught in the filter, and then there'd be a certain amount of carbon in the filter, and the carbon had a lot of intensity of potential to burn, you know, and to just go up in a flash. And
okay. So is it electrostatic precipitator that you have at the moment?
we have cyclone and electrostatic precipitator. So like the electrostatic precipitator just works on a charge, so that dust sticks on to the charge, and then you use hammers to flick the dust down to the bottom.
Is there much monitoring on your business as a result of this biomass boiler? Is the EPA looking at your emissions? Do you get site visits from any?
Oh, we have site visits, and we have to, like, as part of the install there, you provide monitoring points there where they climb up and
they come unannounced?
Unannounced, yeah. But we don't really have much issues, you know, once we got up and running with the boiler and that, like, it's tips away fairly well, you know.
Okay. We come back, Marty and Daniel, after a while about the financials. I'll just go over to Kenny here now, because as I mentioned, Kenny he's a company here called Designer Group down there on the left-hand side. So as I say, he wears a couple of hats. He's also a biomass supplier in Mohill in County Leitrim, but he's also an engineer as well, so he's been involved in a number of projects. Maybe tell us a bit about the projects that you've been involved in, Kenny.
Well, Lou Barry, thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Sean and Noel and the team at IrBEA for facilitating me speaking here today. Yeah, I suppose as you alluded, I'm coming at it from a couple of different perspectives. I suppose initially I've been involved in the fuel supply, biomass fuel supply for the best part of the last 20 years. Also forest owner at home and at the home place, also boiler owner running a drying system, and then with Designer Group with the day job working in the EPC space, designing and installing biomass plants on industrial scale on a global stage, from greenfield site or brownfield site right through to O&M and sending steam or hot water to a client. So as I said, predominantly on a global stage, we've done a lot of work as Designer Group.
I heard Noel mentioning earlier you're working in Africa, you're working all over the world.
Yeah, on brewery sites and distillery sites. Like at the moment, Designer Group we've a 5-year O&M contract on 3 biomass sites in East Africa. That was there are 3 sites that we worked on as the EPC contractor.
That was with Diageo, was it?
It's a Diageo owned site, and obviously the remoteness of where the site is and the nuances with the fuel supply chain. There's also, I suppose a level of operator training required in that area as well, and the part of the world where it is. Very novel fuel supply as well. And then I suppose we have learnings from that, and we travel to Central America and we're working on distillery sites there, slightly larger scale. Again, it's a nuanced fuel supply. It's residues coming from the distillery process. So that the Central American sites in particular there, agave, bagasse, and wood chip 50-50. East Africa, we've been using the likes of macadamia nuts, wood chip, sawdust, rice husks, some difficult materials to combust. And within that, and as part of the O&M experience as well, we manage the fuel supply. The trucks come into site, they're offloaded, the material sampled. From that, we can then arrange it in the fuel store area, and we can identify and pick which fuels from which stock, feed it into the boiler to try and maintain, I suppose, a homogeneous diet through the boiler.
Yeah, that's important to have a continuous same diet. Can you just tell us, what are the typical mistakes that people make when they're deciding to move from fossil fuel to biomass? What's the typical mistakes people make, and what advice would you give?
Well, I suppose, like where we've been working as Designer Group, it's larger sites, quite thermally intensive. Some sites could have been on HFO, quite dirty sites, and you do tend to, operators don't like change. Human nature doesn't like change.
HFO is heavy fuel oil.
Heavy fuel oil, yeah. So you're up against it where an operator team may say, well, we've been doing this for the last 50 years on this site, why do we have to change, and why do we have to change our process? And in a lot of sites as well, like a distillery site, the process is the gospel, is the Bible. You can't change that. So you're trying to satisfy the existing process requirements and bring the operating team on the journey and the understanding of some limitations with biomass and how it reacts, depending on the boiler that's specified. They may be used to operating an oil boiler that's quite responsive, comes online quite quick. But if you install a large step-grade boiler, it has more inertia in it. It's like trying to turn a ship. It doesn't respond as quickly. But if you know you're heading into a scenario like that where you need that responsiveness, maybe you shouldn't be looking at a step-grade boiler. You're looking at an example like what Colin mentioned earlier. There is alternative biomass technologies there, powder burners which burn the biomass essentially in suspension. They react like an oil boiler or a gas boiler. They're essentially a direct replacement. So knowing what your load profile is, knowing what your end demand is it steam or hot water, you know, how quick do you ramp up, how quick do you ramp down, and also on the other side, what's your fuel supply input? So it's important to know, you know, are you purchasing, wood chip from Worrell or ourselves, or are you purchasing pellets from Balcas or Leinster Pellets? You know, knowing that fuel and how that reacts in the boiler as well, all that has to be factored in as early as possible in the design stage to fine-tune what you're getting. So you're not ending up disappointed at the end of the day.
If I put in an oil boiler or a gas boiler, I can potentially oversize it a bit.
Correct.
In the case of a biomass boiler, I shouldn't oversize it.
Yeah, it's much more critical to the efficiency and your operating cost and the longevity of the asset, that it's correctly sized. So, you know, and say if it's a hot water system, your buffer tanks, your accumulators relative to the boiler, relative to your load. In steam systems, if you need accumulators, you know, relative to the boilers, but also selecting the boilers. And like I suppose in Marty's example there, the one large single boiler, and I suppose maybe even in projects we've worked on, we've taken learnings, you know, looking across the fence, looking in to see how it reacted for them. And in sites where we've worked, you know, it's been, say, 2 boilers, for example, where we know, okay, say in a brewery site, they might have a high demand in November on the lead up to the Christmas market. They need, you know, almost 40 tonnes of steam an hour. We've 2 boilers that can carry that. But in the summer months or in off-peak months, 1 boiler's on hot standby or switched off, and the load's been carried with 1 boiler. And these are sites where, again, there existing oil-fired sites. Oil-fired boilers were retained as backup, and in the O&M sites we're working on, the boilers are switched off. They're only fired up for statutory testing, and that's their only carbon emissions on their thermal side. So they've had a 90% carbon reduction on those sites.
Has there been much development in biomass technologies over the last, we say, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, and I suppose we've seen it, and as more elements of the market, I suppose, or as different users would start to look at it. So, like the distillery sites, and echoing a lot of what Colin would have mentioned, sites with a peaky profile, sites that may not have needed to look at it in the past because they mightn't have needed decarbonisation, or they mightn't have needed the commercial reasons to go biomass. But you see technologies coming out, like the powder burners, are, you know, becoming more to the fore, that we wouldn't have seen a requirement for in the past. And it's purely because more ends of the market are looking at it as an option. Also, I suppose, on the emission side, you know, the ability for, I suppose, SCR, for, you know, allowing combustion of maybe a broader spectrum of brash-based material, maybe, or, you know, to stay within compliance of the emissions requirements, and also, I suppose, into particulates as well. So similar to Marty there, moving from bag filters to ESPs. I suppose we've seen shifts there in that regard as well.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. I'm going to go back to Daniel at the start there again, if you want to pass over the microphone. Daniel, we'll maybe look at the finances of this. What were the key financial factors that influenced your decision to switch from a fossil fuel to biomass?
So I suppose when we started looking at it initially, it was back in 2010, 2011. Back then, I suppose oil prices aren't what they are now. I suppose, estimated payback on the project at the time would have been probably 7 years, I think, 7.5 years. What it actually ended up being was about 9.5, but that's purely because the price of oil halved within 4 years, from 2011 to 2016, I think, or 2015. So obviously that's going to have a big effect on the payback. We do have, I suppose, a kind of a long-term consistent pay structure for our wood chip. We have a good kind of local supply, so all the wood chip comes from within 50 kilometres of the site. And I suppose it's just important for companies and industry to try and set up these pay structures. It eliminates, I suppose, variations like that we've seen recently with gas and electricity prices. Like I know for ourselves, electricity prices have gone up about 20% since October. But the wood chip, again, is very consistent, so you don't have those fluctuations.
Maybe the payback in the system for you, did it pay back for, because you didn't get any SSRH for this job at all. So just to discuss the payback maybe on that investment.
Yeah, so the payback would have been about 9.5 years. We did get green capital support from IDA, so again, it's not, I suppose, to the level of the SSRH that you would receive, but it definitely helps pay back. And I suppose when you're proposing these projects to upper management, like we're a Japanese company, so I suppose the site is seen as a kind of sustainability leader in all of Estellas, but they want to see payback really is the bottom line. So for ourselves, it's generally under 5 years is what they look for. So grant aid funding is definitely something you need to look into. Obviously you've got SSRH, Exceed. Again, IDA are providing capital for these types of projects. So obviously paybacks these days would be a lot lower. Your wood chip price is between, I'd say, 4 and 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And obviously gas and electricity are, well, electricity especially is a lot more than that. So on site we do have a lot of renewables. We have solar PV and wind turbines. So again, we're trying to mitigate those costs, and for ourselves, not so much the electrification route, but I suppose switching from oil to wood chip was a big factor in kind of bringing down those operational costs.
Okay. Did the biomass have any impact on your competitive position for your corporate identity? Did it help you? And I'll put that question to Marty afterwards on the food side. Maybe it has more of a competitive advantage there in winning tenders, but you're in the pharma industry, obviously. So did it have any impact on your competitive position to have biomass?
Yeah, again, I suppose it's not really, it's not for our site alone or for Estellas Ireland to kind of push the product. It's more of a global thing. But definitely from our site perspective, obviously from the global headquarters up in Japan, they see our site as a sustainability leader within Estellas. Projects like the wood chip boiler, the wind turbine, solar PV, they all kind of push that narrative within the company. So even in the last few years, like I was saying earlier, we've got a new product, Voiloy. There are new products in the pipeline, and I suppose this just kind of pushes global to look at our site in Kildare. It might not be the most attractive. I suppose you've got less of a talent pool, but just purely from the sustainability side, they love pushing that narrative, and it just encourages them to push more products towards the site. So again, like whether it's packaging or actual manufacturing of the live agent, it really just puts that narrative kind of from global through to our site.
Okay, we're getting tight on time here, I think, by the sounds of it. So maybe, Marty, I'll ask you that question about maybe the corporate identity. You're in the food business. Does it help you in marketing to maybe win tenders to get food on shelves globally?
It's just coming into, I suppose, its own now, where we're maybe looking at doing subcontracting for other companies, but because the product it's all export, and a lot of it to the poorer countries, they don't give a monkey's whether it's produced sustainably or not, you know. So, but like it has helped the site, like, in getting other supports there, because we're seen as being innovative in sticking our necks out and doing stuff, you know. So
do you see food being labelled, like, you know, producing milk or butter, that a litre of milk will have a carbon label in the future, grams of CO2 per litre of milk, where this could be a carbon label on a litre of milk, and it could help you from a marketing perspective?
In Killagordon, all our liquid milk, all the milk we do in Balladreen, where that biomass is just for export, where in Killagordon we have a heat pump there, and the fact is that it will help with the labelling, but there's no one prepared to give us any more money for the contract, shall we say. It's the best price still, even though we could, we have gas there along with the heat pump, so we could become totally green there by putting in biogas. And we have asked questions of the multiples, and they're not yet willing to do that label and give the extra bit of support for the product, you know.
I have a load more questions to ask, but I know when I look at Sean, he's saying don't ask them. But I'll just ask you a quick question, and before maybe we'll go to the floor for one or two questions as well. But maybe future outlook for your existing biomass system. Where do you see the future bringing you? You don't have gas supply in Balladreen, I don't think, do you?
No, we have just LPG.
Yeah. Okay, and maybe.
Well, what we're hoping to do is enhance the boiler more to get it maybe through gas there, so that we'll be able to use it a bit more through the shoulder periods, because the type of business we're in Ballahadreen is as the grass grows, so there's very little milk during the winter months, so you have very little requirement, and then we're 24/7 during the summer months and 30 tonne an hour of steam requirement, so it's very variable. That's a bit of a disaster from the point of view of trying to get the maximum out of the likes of the boiler. So I think enhancement with the gas, and then getting automation around the air supply and all of that to enhance the burning, you know, so...
Yeah, air to fuel ratio, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And just while you have the microphone in your hand, what advice would you give to anybody in this room who's considering getting a biomass boiler for their company?
Well, I suppose number one is the sustainable supply of wood chips. Like, we were very lucky there in 2024, the EPA sent this announcement in, as of today, the 1st of January, you're paying carbon tax on your biomass supply, like so, and that would have cost us in the region of, say, 1.7 million euro at 70 euro a tonne, you know, so it's vital that there's a sustainability accredited system around the supply chain.
Yeah.
You know, because the carbon is like, they've loaded biomass, and I don't know why, at 403 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour, like, which is a bit ridiculous, to be honest, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and we'll go over to Daniel again. Daniel, future outlook, please. And
Yeah, so I suppose we have...
advice as well to anybody considering it.
So for our own site, obviously we were early adopters, where the boiler itself is in 13 years now, so I suppose it's nearly coming time for us to start looking at either replacement or just upgrades. Something we don't have is an economizer, so we're looking currently to put in a condensing economizer. I suppose these kind of opportunities, like you're exhausting 220-degree exhaust gases out the stack. So again, I suppose it comes down to planning day one. Like I said, the actual boiler is very far from the site, so again, that pushes costs of these kind of efficiency upgrades up quite high. Pipe work up and down to the site, electrical costs. We also have a new plant going up in Tralee now, so they're probably looking at I'd say a carbon copy design of our own boiler. And again, I suppose it's just do your research on the grants, engage with SAI, IDA, and yeah, like there's plenty of opportunities out there. It's just get the right design crowd in. I suppose know what you're looking for, and just consider the actual needs of your site.
And you're building a plant in Tralee at the moment. Are you putting a biomass boiler in there also?
Yeah, so I suppose it'll be another year and a half before it's actually operational. But again, we had a good experience with our own biomass boiler, so that was installed by Verdo over based in Denmark. So I think they won the contract for the new design again. I suppose it's, like I said before, going up to globally as a Stellis. They see the kind of success story of our own boiler. It's just up to them to push that for the new sites, and on a global scale as well. I suppose they're looking at a power purchase agreement for wood chip over in Japan, so that's on a much larger scale. Even in our Dublin facility now, they're looking at a district heating solution, so I suppose there are a lot of options there, especially in more crowded areas, Dublin, Cork. There's a lot of opportunities for district heating, and yeah, look, there's plenty of options out there, I suppose.
Daniel, thanks for that. And just, Kenny, finally to you, maybe, where do you see biomass technologies going over maybe the next 5-10 years? And also, would you give some advice to anybody in the room who's interested in putting in a biomass system, your key tips?
I suppose biomass, and I've been involved in it for a number of years. There is ebbs and flows, as someone alluded to earlier. I suppose on the back of decarbonisation and the need for large entities and large thermal users to do it, I suppose electrification is sometimes an easier option. And I suppose what we're seeing on the install side, or on the, I suppose, the EPC contractor side, there's obviously challenges around grid constraints and getting connections,
Yeah.
and it's probably pushing more users who may not have initially looked at biomass as an option to start considering it, and it may be more in nuanced applications where they have maybe a difficult steam load, and we're probably seeing more outside of just the standard big, large step-grade boiler. I suppose long term, there's discussions around carbon capture and adding that to biomass installs as well. And I suppose it's early days in that, but I suppose it's something that we will be keeping an eye on for the future. And then I suppose for us with Designer Group and the experience of being abroad, the variability in fuels and identifying the correct fuels that you have available in the region, and I suppose understanding that and having your install an asset to suit that. But I suppose early engagement, either through an engineering office or a consultant or whatever, bring them on board as early as possible, because by the time the boiler is spec'd, it's too late to be thinking about what fuel you're putting through it or what your load requirements are. So early engagement.
Okay, Kenny, thanks for that. I know we're really gone. Is there anybody any quick questions there before the end, if you want to put them to the panelists? No? Okay, everyone wants to get home for the Easter bank holiday weekend. Okay, okay. I want to thank my panelists here. I want to thank Daniel Walsh from Astellas, Marty Dervin from IrBEA, and Kenny McCauley from the Designer Group, and his stand is just down there on the left-hand side if you want to engage with them. If you can put your hands together for them, please. So to finish it off, Teresa, who engages with everyone, does an awful lot of work on this in organising this event. Teresa is going to come up here and close things off. So Teresa O'Brien, do you want to come up here? Oh, sorry, there you are. I thought you were at the back. Okay. Thanks, Teresa.
So, thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of IrBEA, we hope you found the event informative and that it gave you a better understanding of the role and the potential of biomass in decarbonising industrial heat. I'd like to take a moment to just reflect on some of the highlights from the day. We started with Maurice, who spoke about the important role that biomass sector can play in sustainable forest management. William discussed the broader energy decarbonisation challenges and reminded us that no single solution will be enough. We need all the renewable energy sources working together. Eugene presented COFOD's analysis of biomass resource availability over the medium to long term. Iris walked us through the sustainability, certification and verification processes placed in place for the SURE certification scheme. After the break, we had the first panel highlighting the supports available through Enterprise Ireland, the support scheme for renewable heat, and the National Forestry Strategy. We also heard about the industrial decarbonisation roadmap and how the SSRH could be extended to the ETS sector. Michael outlined the regulatory requirements that ensure air quality standards are maintained with biomass deployment. Noel introduced the latest developments in bioenergy technology and shared some current success stories already making an impact in Ireland. After lunch, we had Ken demonstrate the supply chain capacity for wood chip. Colm explained the pellet production process and recent developments in powder burning technologies. Paddy gave us a regional perspective from the southeast, looking at biomass supply and decarbonisation opportunities. And the final panel, which just now was chaired by Barry, we had Daniel, Marty and Kenny share their stories into the systems they design and operate. And thanks for sharing those experiences. Finally, a big thank you to our sponsors, SEAI, Worrell Timber Group, Biomass Energy, the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme and the South East Energy Agency. Your support has been invaluable in making today a success. Thanks to all our exhibitors. I hope you had great engagement with the attendees. A sincere thank you to all the speakers, presenters and panelists, especially those who've travelled a long distance to be here today. Thanks to the hotel for looking after us so well, to John, our photographer, to Greg, our videographer, and Kevin, who handles sound. And a personal big thank you to Julianne and Trish, of course, the two girls that helped me run the show. And finally, we'd like to see you all again at the National Bioenergy Conference this October, where we'll continue this conversation on how we can scale up the use of biomass as a key part of Ireland's energy transition. I'll be checking in the summer with more details on that event. Thanks again, and safe journey home.